Right, hello everyone. Good evening and welcome to the first in this new series of Europa Nostra UK webinars. My name's Sarah Crofts. I am the chair of Europa Nostra UK, and as you can see from my background, courtesy of Zoom, I am the chief executive of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting by day. But tonight I'm very much here to talk to you about Europa Nostra and to steer us through what I hope is going to be a very pleasant hour. So hopefully a few of you have already heard of Europa Nostra, but a few words about it first, if you'll oblige me. As Europeans, we've lived here for centuries in the continent, and also, of course, we include in that the people who've newly arrived. And together, we have to take full responsibility for transmitting our heritage in good shape to future generations. So Europa Nostra is a pan-European heritage organisation that takes responsibility for transmitting the heritage in good shape to future generations. It's the leading citizens' movement protecting and celebrating Europe's cultural and natural heritage. And Europa Nostra believes that we are the voice of all who believe that our cultural heritage is vital for our economy, our society, our culture, our environment, our well-being, and indeed for the future of Europe. So within the large group that is Europa Nostra UK is a UK-based charity that supports the actions of our parent. And we have some particular aims as well, things that we're trying to achieve. We're trying to nurture enthusiasm for our shared European cultural heritage. And we're hoping to articulate the values and ideas that connect us to our colleagues in Europe. We are, as always, trying to raise the profile of Europa Nostra UK in order to support Europa Nostra's Europe-wide representation. And we're trying to foster links and cooperation with other European heritage bodies and civil society and beyond. And all of this is about helping us to sustain UK participation in shaping European heritage policy and vice versa. So tonight we're delighted to bring you, as I said, the first webinar in a new series of Europa Nostra UK webinars. And these are going to be showcasing recent European Heritage Award winners from the UK, as well as projects from elsewhere that might inspire people and organisations in the UK, because there's lots that we can learn from others. We've chosen to focus on the European Heritage Awards, also known as the Europa Nostra Awards, because they are a brilliant showcase of good practice and exciting ideas. They were launched in 2002 by the European Commission, and they've been run by Europa Nostra ever since. And this is a particularly special year because it's the 21st anniversary of the most prestigious awards in the heritage field. The aim of the awards is to identify and promote best practices in the conservation and enhancement of tangible and intangible heritage, to stimulate the transfrontier exchange of knowledge throughout Europe, to increase public awareness and appreciation of Europe's cultural heritage, and to encourage further excellent initiatives through the power of example. So before we move on to the particular topic of this evening's webinar, I just have one or two little housekeeping things that I need to share with you. So please do use the chat function. Introduce yourselves, tell us where you are, tell us why you care about European cultural heritage. And as Lisa inspires you with her talk, you can also drop your questions in there, because we will have a Q&A session at the end. Please keep things friendly, keep things light-hearted. We're here to learn and to have fun and to respect everyone who's joined us on the webinar. Please bear in mind that this is being recorded, so if you're asking a question, you will be caught for posterity. And Lisa too, we will share this as widely as we can after the webinar. So with not much further ado, I'd like to move on and introduce our speaker and the topic of tonight's webinar, which is Archaeology at Home. Archaeology at Home is an award-winning project from the 2021 awards, and it was a winner in the Education, Training and Awareness Raising category. Your speaker tonight is Lisa Westcott Wilkin, who's founder and co-CEO of DigVentures, which is the organisation that devised and delivered the project. In selecting Archaeology at Home as an award winner, the jury said the following: By situating learning at its basis, Archaeology at Home has provided knowledge and guidance to people who want to approach archaeology as amateurs. It can also provide an open database of materials and artefacts that otherwise would have been unknown, which helps to curtail the illegal sale of these objects. I'd also like to mention that Archaeology at Home won an International Heritage in Motion Prize for innovation, as well as a Europa Nostra Prize, and was selected for inclusion in the Best in Heritage in 2022. So we are very fortunate tonight to have Lisa with us and to hear about this excellent work. So over to you, Lisa.
There we go. We had a little bit of a technical glitch there. As Sarah said, it is technology, so be patient. I couldn't unmute myself, but thanks very much for the introduction. And before I get into the sort of meat and potatoes of the talk, I did want to reinforce what Sarah was saying about how important it is for all of us in the UK to stay involved in the European heritage conversation. We've had so many benefits at DigVentures from being sort of at the table with everybody since we won the award, and just being able to absorb the ideas and the conversations that are still circling. It really truly has made the last few years much richer for us. So if there's anybody in the audience today who's not already a member, I would encourage you to explore the membership benefits and see what being involved might bring to you as well. So I'm going to share my presentation now. Slides, give me 1 second. Just have to pull them up. Zoom could really make this easier, I think. Hold on, bear with me. There we go, and open. Good. As Sarah said, we won in the education, training, and awareness raising category. So I really wanted to sort of highlight that as being a really important part of the project for us, because quite a lot of the work that happens in our sector is very highly localized. And I think that the sort of mass impact of the sort of size of the participation that we experienced as a result of Archaeology at Home was one of the big factors for us in feeling like it deserved recognition at European level, and also in terms of the continuing legacy of the project, which I'll be talking about a little bit later on. So just to talk about DV a little bit for those of you that don't know us, we are a platform that enables civic participation in archaeology and heritage projects. One of the really important things about this business is that because we started with crowdfunding in 2012, at the very beginning of crowdfunding actually coming to Europe, that meant that we have always had a very active digital virtual community. So, you know, from the very beginning of DigVentures, 50% of the people that have participated in anything that we do or that have been a part of our community have never even come to site. So we were always highly, highly aware that, you know, we had this whole community of people that started out international, really, outside of what was happening in our trenches. So we are archaeologists, we dig archaeology, and we work in the finds room, and our mission is really to bring the public into that process as much as we can. It is traditionally quite an elite and sort of closed field and closed practice. So the business started as an experiment in seeing what we could do to sort of blow the boundaries of that and make it more accessible to a much wider range of people. And any excuse to show some dogs, but we started in 2012 with 2 archaeologists and a dog, and I offer that simply to illustrate our growth, because we're now up to 17 archaeologists and 2 dogs. And things have been moving along and growing quite quickly since 2012. So as I said previously, our mission is to expand engagement with archaeological research, and we do all different kinds of projects. So, you know, your sort of traditional commercial archaeology and advanced development, to working with organizations to design activity plans. But at the heart of everything that we do is looking for that potential to increase the social value and the public impact of what we do and what archaeology can achieve, really. And we've designed an evaluation system for this and a methodology behind it, which we call social impact archaeology. And the three sort of notes at the bottom here are an illustration of what we think are the major tenets of this, which is basically that you can have, one of the big arguments around working with public participation in heritage and archaeology is whether or not having people on the inside of your projects actually takes away from the quality of the research that you're doing or the rigor of the work that you're doing. And actually, we come very much from the perspective that it increases the value and increases the rigor of the work. You know, we're constantly amazed by the amount of expertise and effort that comes to us from our community, whether that's through our online activities or from people actually joining us in the trenches or the finds room. And, you know, we've been able to see firsthand over the last 10 years, you know, that being a part of that process has absolutely transformational power. Everything from, you know, well-being through to people who have decided to change their lives and perhaps enter the field professionally or go to university and study either as a young student or a mature student. So, you know, coming face to face with the past has got this sort of universal mystical moment, like interactions with most other kinds of culture does. And it's fantastic for us to always be sort of at the edge of that happening for people when we're on site together. And just behind my head here, you can see that we've also experienced archaeology's potential to help communities become more sustainable, you know, in bringing all kinds of legacy aspects to a community once the archaeology has been done. So we have been hybrid from the beginning. Our first ever campaign at Flag Fen, which is a site just outside of Peterborough, a Bronze Age site, some of you may know it, was the world's first ever crowdfunded excavation. And it blew our minds. As I said, it was an experiment and we didn't know what to expect. It was happening in the same summer as the Olympics, but we were able to raise £32,000 in 90 days from 250 people in 11 different countries. That was, you know, very eye-opening for us. And we, you know, we're lucky enough to have had a really good audience evaluation strategy in place. And so we were able to understand the benefits that this work brought to the site, let alone, you know, funding the actual scientific research. Flag Fen is a visitor attraction, and at that time it experienced a downturn in visitation. Over the 3 weeks that we were there, we brought 2,000 people to site, of which was a 29% increase in, you know, year on year from their visitor numbers previously. And, you know, 60% of those people had never visited the site, 50% lived locally. And, you know, we thought, are we onto something? And we realized that we were. So it happened again, and then again, and again, and again. And now we're sort of 10 years on in that process and seeing these big impacts keep happening for individuals, for the actual heritage sites themselves, and for the communities that live around these places. So we've now done over 100 community-focused projects through a combination of different ways of funding. We have over 44,000 participants, so people who have actively taken part in what we're doing, located all over the world, both, you know, online and in person. And we have raised over £2 million in crowdfunding and matched grants. We were one of the first organizations, if not the actual first organization, to be able to work with the National Lottery Heritage Fund and use crowdfunding as a match for their grants. So, and here's just a little slide talking about that hybrid model. You know, we get a lot of people coming to site who've always wanted to try archaeology. A lot of people in our online courses are just curious, you know, and we're basically here to provide a channel for those people who want to learn, who have, you know, this interest in archaeology that they've always had in their lives. And many people wanted to be an archaeologist and couldn't or didn't, and DigVentures is here to not only do important research, but also to provide a pathway for people to explore that curiosity. And transforming watching into doing is a really important part of what we do, but equally providing those opportunities for people to watch who won't necessarily be able to come to site. And that became incredibly important to us when the pandemic hit. So, DV and COVID-19, this brings me to the genesis of the Archaeology at Home project, for which we won the Europa Nostra Award. If we can all cast our minds back to, you know, 2020 in March when the first lockdown hit, I can still remember the moment, just sitting there realizing that we were going to be at home, that everybody was going to be at home, and that we needed to somehow find a way through this moment to continue our operations as an organization. And because we have always been hybrid from the beginning, we were lucky enough to have this virtual digital function already. We were set up to do it. Our team was able, for those who weren't furloughed, to be a part of it. And so we took some resources we already had, which was an online course called How to Do Archaeology, and decided, you know what, everyone's stuck at home. We'll open this course to the world. We'll get like a handful of people who want to come along and do this with us, you know, while we're all stuck at home. And, you know, we'll have some fun and, you know, see what happens. Additionally, we had a festival, an in-person archaeology festival called DigNation that was supposed to happen at Sudeley Castle in Gloucestershire. And of course, you know, there wasn't going to be any in-person festivals happening. So we thought at the same time, you know, there are plenty of archaeologists who are sitting at home on the couch who should be out in the field digging this summer, or they should be in their labs looking through microscopes, and they're away from their work as well. So wouldn't it be a fantastic idea to see whether or not we could get them to tell our community about the work they should have been doing, you know, had we all been able to get back out into normal life at that point. So the DigNation Festival pivoted away from being on site at Sudeley Castle and onto our virtual platform. So we'll talk about the course a little bit first, and then I'll talk about the DigNation Virtual Festival, because these were the pieces that are the ingredients, let's say, of the Archaeology at Home project. So I just wanted to show you briefly what our online course platform looks like. This is where we started. There's a lot of archaeology courses or ancient history courses out there, and they're very site-based. You know, there weren't a lot at the time that actually got into the technical details of how you actually do archaeology. What are the ethics behind it? What happens when you find something? What do you do afterward? How do you close down your site? Why do we do what we do? What are the tools that you need? These kind of really practical things. So we had the course ready and waiting to go, and this is the one that we decided to share with everybody. The response was completely overwhelming. We also released a kids version, how to do archaeology for kids, which was presented by one of our youngest participants, Rosie, who's been digging with us since I think she was about 8 or 9, maybe. She's probably going to end up being my boss someday. She's amazing. But in the end, we had over 8,000 people from 80 countries who took part in the course. Given that we were only expecting a handful of about 30, you can imagine what it felt like to wake up to the news and to see all the people who had registered for that. It was absolutely mind-boggling. And so we set up a Facebook study group for those people who had registered to sort of check in with each other, because the volume of it was way more than my team could actually handle in terms of answering the questions. And it was something that was very much driven by the needs of our community. You know, we had cohorts, we had whole groups of students from universities in other countries. I can think of one in Jamaica, one in Saudi Arabia, one in Myanmar. You know, there were groups of students who were not able to complete the fieldwork that they needed to do for their courses. And so as teams, they sort of went through our course together, and we heard from their instructors throughout the process. And, you know, that was another one of these really wonderful sort of byproducts that we hadn't been expecting. We saw a social dimension emerging in the Facebook study group. Initially, everyone was connecting over, you know, did you do the homework for chapter 2, or do you understand this question about a test pit? But little by little, as the lockdown got longer, and as the impacts of the virus got deeper on us as, you know, humanity, we started to see people bringing different kinds of things to the chat. They were helping each other out. They were talking about diagnoses. They were talking about loss. You know, it was a really powerful unintended consequence of that study group. And it really sort of made us understand that this was a global conversation that just sort of happened to be happening through the medium of archaeology, but these were universal human concerns. And then a great archaeology happened. So we had a furloughed wedding photographer from Derbyshire who found, using satellite imagery in the teaching in our course, who found a previously unknown henge. So, I mean, that is really the things that we all dream about as archaeologists, is being able to find something that nobody's ever found before. So we were absolutely thrilled that that was another one of the byproducts of the project. Here's a map. As you know, we evaluate everything at DV. It's endlessly curious to us where people come from and why they want to be a part of archaeology. So this is a map of where people participated from. And, you know, we joke that we really need to do much better in Greenland. So we haven't been able to crack that yet, but maybe with our next project we'll keep trying. But as you can see, the spread of countries where people were taking part is really good. And for the places that we weren't able to reach anyone, it definitely gives us something to keep working towards. But we were happy to see that it came. Our biggest communities are always the UK, the US, and Australia, so it was really great for us to see that the course landed with people beyond those places, and also a very high proportion from continental Europe. And again, for those of you out there who might be curious, the thing that was most important to us about the demographic spread of people who took part in the project is that it was way beyond the kinds of people who normally participate in archaeology and heritage events. I think the opportunity of the pandemic that the pandemic offered was that so many people who are generally too busy to do things like this were at home with nothing to do. So that allowed us to reach a much broader audience than we would normally with this kind of activity. And here's just a few of the comments. You can see at the top, Zachary Beyer was the instructor from the group of students in Jamaica, and some of the other reasons that people took part in the project, and some of the feedback that we got for offering it out for free. And a lot of these are people and organizations who have stuck with DV since that point. So it's really always wonderful for me to look back on where it all began. And so the festival, this was the tweet that I sent after having my breakthrough moment when I realized that there were so many archaeologists at home who might really relish the opportunity to talk about the things that get them out of bed in the morning. So the brief that we sent out to everybody was really just tell us what you love about your job. Tell us what you think is exciting. What should you have been doing, and where should you have been digging, or what should you have been working on this summer, and give us a 20-minute presentation. And we built it to screen over the course of a weekend on a bespoke virtual platform, which you can see here, called the Festival Big Dig Energy, and we timed it to release over the course of a weekend, so it still had that live sort of festival / conference type feeling. And we were active across socials at the same time so that people could be asking questions, both of the DV team as well as the presenters themselves, many of whom who were able actually managed to be online for the time that their presentation was screening. What's funny for me looking back on all of this now is that this doesn't seem like a big deal anymore. Organizations are doing this kind of thing and being coordinated across all their virtual channels, in a much more sophisticated way than most of us were operating at that time. But for us, this was one of the first ones out there that was multi-channel in that way. And it was a really, really exciting moment and hugely influential for us in terms of our, future and continuing operations. So here's just an example of some of the places that we got presentations from. We had, I think, 32 different presentations from 26 different countries. These are projects that we're still in touch with, and we sort of know qualitatively that there are people from within the DV community who have now become volunteers on these projects or are still following them, and that to us is just an amazing dividend to having done this work. So a few stats, we had, as you can see here, over 2,000 people from 90 different countries who attended the festival, 34 presentations from 26 countries, and we had 550 audience comments at the time. But as I said here, we're still sort of getting them. They trickle in from time to time as people revisit the content and continue to have questions about what everyone was talking about. And another one of the really fantastic unintended consequences, but powerful things that came out of this work was that this was the first time that many of these primarily academic teams had ever had the opportunity to present their work to the general public. Most of the archaeologists who participated are from academic institutions, and they normally only speak at conferences or events that are closed to the general public. So they never have that chance to sort of step away from the highly academic, very structured formats and language and just sort of say, this is why I love what I do. This is what's cool about it. This is why I want you guys to hear about what I'm doing. And, in conversations following up from that, it was very apparent that they had learned quite a lot about why their work resonates outside of an academic context. And, you know, in terms of the conversation with Europe, continental Europe anyway, this was a really different experience for many of them. And we were so pleased to have been a part of that and to have stimulated that kind of thinking for them. And here's a map of the projects that presented are the little white dots there. And again, the participation from the people who actually came to the conference. A really good spread of projects. The content is still up online for anybody who's curious to go and have a look. I'm sure Ginny can pop it in the chat, or we can send it out in the email that we're gonna send around to you guys after this presentation, if any of you are curious to see some of the talks that we had. So for us, in terms of the motivation behind applying for the Europa Nostra Award and really feeling like this project belonged at that European relevance and global context level, is that, you know, in total, the number of people who participated sort of positioned this as the biggest single public archaeology event that's really ever taken place in this way. And that for us was a over 3,000% year-on-year increase in terms of our participation. And as I mentioned previously, the inclusive design, so the fact that pretty much anyone who could get onto the internet could participate in what we were doing, extended the reach in terms of the diversity of our audience far beyond what we had experienced previously and far beyond what we know of the kinds of people who normally consume this kind of content. And that has had continuing effects for us, as well as how archaeologists in general in the UK think about their audience and the potential and who's actually interested in the work that we do. And we also realized that what had happened, given what the post-pandemic tourism and content consumption of cultural type of activities looks like, that what we had done was a model for the future. So not only in terms of implementing interdisciplinary ideas, but the methods for sharing heritage content through, for example, the festival, the online festival format, as well as the opportunity to work in tandem with public participants or citizens, shall we say, in a much different way through the virtual field school, where not only we were sharing knowledge, but they were generating knowledge and data back to us as professionals. And then looking at that model in terms of, you know, encouraging a crowd to become more deeply involved in your organization and what that can mean in terms of financial resilience, you know, new income streams, which post-pandemic is something that all cultural heritage organizations are thinking about. And, you know, looking at the model and saying, you know, this is scalable, that organizations of all types and all sizes can do some form of this activity and to help support themselves into the future to be more resilient. And, you know, saying it now feels like, well, of course, because all of us are now doing it. But at the time when we applied for the Europa Nostra Award, it was still really new and really fresh, and we were all still really struggling our way through. You know, is it even a post-pandemic world yet? You know, how do we flex as small to large organizations? You know, what is the capabilities that we have as heritage professionals to change the way that we work to deal with these new audiences and reach them and bring them into what we do? So here's just some of the judges' feedback. You know, I was really struck by the recognition of the model difference and, you know, the acceptance that this could sort of mark a scalable model that for wider adoption in Europe, and also, you know, the fact that there was a recognition of how community archaeology and community participation does help embed this kind of, you know, awareness of cultural heritage in our social lives and experiences together. So yes, I just wanted to share those. As I mentioned earlier, there is a legacy to archaeology at home, and this slide just illustrates, you know, our in-person participation, the lifeblood of our organization, welcoming people into our trenches and into our finds labs, went down by 75% in the pandemic. And, you know, obviously it's been, you know, participation and attendance at cultural heritage organizations and events has, you know, been going up since then. But at the time, nobody knew how long we were going to be in these conditions. You know, we were confronted with a situation where we didn't know whether or not we'd ever go back to those kinds of operations, or how long it would take and what that would mean for us financially, let's say. And our online participation went up by 3,100%. And this changed forever how DigVentures operates and how we think about our audiences and how we service our audiences in terms of our digital and physical integration. So since then, we have a whole host of new audiences. We've instituted a subscriber program, which is the final bullet there. We had people basically saying to us, how do we just give you money to thank you for all of this free content? We just want to be a part of what you do. And outside of crowdfunding, we'd never really had something organized in that way. So our experience through Archaeology at Home stimulated us to really release a subscriber model where people could get even more deeply involved in what we do as stakeholders and influencing the decisions we make about, for example, new online courses, or how many online courses, what kind of sites do we want to dig, what kind of material do they want to know more about. And our content strategy has changed dramatically as a result of having that kind of feedback loop, constant feedback loop with our community. It's changed the way we work with our partners and the kinds of projects we're able to deliver for them. We saw an increased need from the archaeology and heritage sector for teams that could pivot to digital in the case that we were confronted with another sudden lockdown or other kinds of communities who just would never attend events in person any longer. And it's changed the way that we work on site as well. We've kept some of the we had a one-way system running around the trenches with arrows in and out here, and the sort of personal dig buckets and other kinds of logistical changes that we made that we've actually decided to keep because it helped with the way that the sites flow and work that we would have never known about had it not been for the changes through the Archaeology at Home project that we were confronted with. And then finally, the collective intelligence model, which I'm sharing with you here. And collective intelligence is really a relationship between data and people and tech, which is enabled by technology. And it's a collaborative relationship that very much functions with all three of these pieces being equal. So what we saw and what inspired us from Archaeology at Home when the wedding photographer found the previously unknown henge was the potential for being even more deeply involved in bringing our participants even more deeply into our work by enabling them to contribute to scientific discoveries and to be a much more comprehensive part of the work that we do. So Archaeology at Home has now sort of evolved, let's say, into our newest project, and it's basically an R&D project called Deep Time, looking at the adaptive challenge of the net zero targets that both the United Kingdom and and Europe is facing regarding the mitigation of vast swathes of landscape in order through peatland reclamation, carbon capture, reforestation, all the things that we as a society need to do if we're going to meet our net zero targets in service to sort of saving the planet from the climate impacts. So it is an adaptive challenge, and it requires a lot more than a technical solution. It requires a whole new way of working. And inspired by Archaeology at Home, we've now run a pilot project funded by Nesta, the UK's innovation charity, which has now moved into further funding from the UKRI Smart Innovation Grant. We're working with the National Trust across 3 of their sites this summer to look at different ways of mobilizing citizen scientists to help us identify unknown archaeology on their landscapes, which is something that, all big landowners in the UK and everywhere are going to need to understand a bit better before we can put anything into mitigation. Or if you're a landowner, for example, dealing with coastal erosion, what archaeology is there? How are we going to quantify it? How are we going to understand it before we can do anything to the landscape to mitigate? So this is a project designed to answer that, as well as include communities and individuals in this process that is happening to the places where they live, and to include them as stakeholders in decisions that might be made about their places in the future. Here, I've just put down some badges to show how we're working their involvement. Pastronauts, one of my favorite of all DV's inventions. Pastronauts are our name for the community participants. And so Pastronauts join us. Through an online course, 6 weeks, we train them how to identify sites from satellite and LiDAR data. They then go through a verification process, and at the end what we come out with is a very much enriched idea of the archaeology and landscapes. We're leaning heavily into the whole sort of space camp vibe with all of this, and my colleagues would joke that pretty soon they're going to talk us into buying jumpsuits. But this helps us make sense both back to the pastronauts and to the landowners that we're working with, most particularly organizations of the size of the National Trust, the different levels of expertise and training that each one of our pastronauts have gone through. And it helps motivate and incentivize people to keep going and keep learning in their journey. So that's what happened for us as a result of the legacy of archaeology at home. And that's all I've got for today, so I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And that was a really exciting presentation. And I've heard you speak before, and I particularly enjoy the buzz, the passion, the enthusiasm, but also the fact that what you do is fun. It's important, it's educational, it has purpose, but people have fun as well. And I think that's, for me, one of the lessons that I really take away from it. So this, dear audience, is your opportunity to ask some questions. I've written down about 20, so but I'm very happy to keep mine for another day and let others ask their questions. But perhaps while people are just formulating some thoughts, I might sort of launch in. I actually just wanted to know, firstly, from you, how does it make you feel that people celebrate you as an innovator? Was that you didn't really set out to be an innovator, but now that you are, how does it feel?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's become this real sort of lifeblood for us, and certainly is the focus of everything that we do, because as a small organization, you know, we can go and explore these ideas and bring things back to the sector and share back what our experiences are on the sort of cutting edge of all these things that so many of my talented colleagues and other organizations would love to have a crack at. And, you know, one of the things that we constantly hear from people in big organizations is that it takes so long to change, you know, and there's no funding in the budget, for example, for the freedom to innovate. And, you know, the risk, particularly post-pandemic, of trying things and having them not work is way too much for most organizations to bear. So, you know, I definitely feel a responsibility as someone who has the, you know, the time and the ability and actually the raison d'etre to constantly test and push to report back and actually share with my colleagues and share with other people in the sector how this is working and how they might be able to embrace some of these ideas. And those are the conversations that really excite me, actually, and that I most look forward to.
Yeah, I think it's nice to be leading and be able to experiment, but actually you have the affirmation from your colleagues, archaeologists in other organizations who've chosen to be part of the project. So I think it's that demonstrates the fact that everyone sees the usefulness and the positives in this approach.
Yeah, it's really actually crazy to think, you know, whenever I talk about this project, it does bring me back to kind of how we all were before, you know, which it was very different to how it is now. And I'm constantly amazed by how quickly actually organizations have caught up and are sort of reaching out to try to do these things in a new way. And I, you know, without having been forced to, I just wonder how many would have done it at this pace and be positioned now in the sort of positioned to answer the challenges that are coming as a result of the increased pace, let's say, of climate impacts and what that's going to do to how we all operate sustainably.
I think that's an interesting point. And I speak as someone who's spent 20 years working in cultural heritage, and I think there can be a reticence to explore digital technologies, and maybe even more than that, maybe people are a little terrified of it. What would you say to people who think, oh, it's a bit too new and too scary, we don't have the skills, where would we start?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not for everybody, and not every organization has to be digital in the same way that DV is, you know, and there are some things which just simply don't translate. And, you know, even we come away from in-person events or meetings going, there really is no substitute for that, you know. But what I would say is that, you know, figure out what are your needs as an organization and say, all right, how much of that do I really have to do digitally? And how much of me is just feeling like I have to be digital because everybody else is? It's kind of like I remember a few years ago there was this big question about whether or not VR was going to have this widespread adoption, and on a consumer level, and lots of big cultural organizations were saying, oh, we must have a VR thing, and we must explore virtual tours, and we must. But unless you have a really strong community of people who are looking for that kind of content from you, there's no point doing it. So I think really it's understand your audience. If you're a small organization that doesn't have a ton of digital skills, I mean, do you have an audience that needs that? Or are you much better served by focusing on helping them in a different way? So I would say, that's really, start with why, as always.
Yeah, and who, I think, is the other part of what you're saying, because it's clear that DigVentures is absolutely tuned into your community, what it is they're looking for. What's your approach to engaging with the community, finding out what they want? What's your tools and your tips and your tricks that we can learn from?
Oh my God. Okay. Well, there's a book called New Power, which anyone who runs a membership organization or has subscribers or whatever should read instantly. It's by Henry Timms and Jeremy Hymans. It's a quick read, but it sort of lays out this whole balance of how the difference in the way the world operates now. And if you're on social media, it should be a two-way conversation. And if you're paying attention, you will hear what your community needs from you as an organization to keep them happy and serviced. And when you're in a crowdfunding relationship, let's say, it's the same as getting money from any other grant funder. Everybody's got, you need to report back to your funders as to how you're delivering on the promises that you made to them, whether it's the NLHF or, UKRI or your crowdfunding cohort. And, crowdfunders are noisy and they're legion, and they will tell you, if and when you're not giving them what they want or what they want more of. So really, we just create the space to be able to have that dialogue, and we use the channels that we have to be able to do that. And does it sometimes mean that something a little bit uncomfortable comes out because everybody has different standards of how they communicate online and is visible all the time to everyone? Yeah, it does. But that's all part of understanding your audiences. And so I suppose my tips would be, try to back away from the risk averseness a little, recognize that if you're going to be effective at communicating with your audiences, that, it requires a different kind of conversation than it did pre-pandemic. And, listening is really important. The old model of just crafting and blasting advertising messages that we would stick on a billboard, let's say, or on the side of a bus. There are some organizations that's how they use social media. But you're really missing your opportunity for that two-way conversation when you do that, when it's just like pulsing outward rather than holding a space for people to communicate back inward. And if you have a really strong digital policy and the people who run your feeds know that they don't have to deal with any abusive language, let's say, which unfortunately does happen, then there shouldn't be any I think reticence in opening yourselves up like that. It truly is the easiest and best way to find out what your community want from you.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. I'm keeping an eye on the chat. I'm not seeing any questions coming in, which I'm surprised, because there's so much we can learn from what you've been doing with the DigVentures team. So I do encourage people to lob in their questions, and I promise that I will elevate them to the top of the list.
Yeah.
What I didn't say when I introduced this evening is that I have a very personal stake in the European Heritage Awards, because I actually I'm now the chair of the panel for education, training and skills. So I see a lot of projects that apply for Europa Nostra Awards, European Heritage Awards, and one of the things that is a slight disappointment in a lot of the projects that we see is that the projects haven't really grasped the need for robust evaluation. And my take on it is that in the UK, because many projects are funded through the lottery funding one way or another, or they're funded through UKRI, which is the UK research infrastructure, their evaluation is very much built into the way these things work. And if you look for funding, you know how this operates. I wonder could you maybe say a few words of advice to people about why that kind of evaluation matters, and the sort of simple things that people can do to demonstrate the kind of impact that you've shown us in your slides? Well,
I mean, our evaluation journey with DigVentures started when I worked at the Olympics in 2012 as a contractor, and I was basically the project manager for the evaluation of the Cultural Olympiad, which was the big £100 million pound art festival that accompanied the Olympics. And I was always very struck when I was in the room with people about how other cultural forms, let's say like dance or theater or film or whatever, how deep of an understanding they had about their audiences, whereas there were no heritage people in that room at all, you know. And so when you look at the way that the festival was designed, there really wasn't many heritage events in the same way that there were other cultural forms, let's say, even though we belong within that suite of things. And so we realized that if you don't evaluate it, it didn't happen. So we started thinking, like, what's actually important about evaluation? What do we need to know for us as an organization, as well as what questions our funders going to be asking of us in the future? And we just started there. You know, I think there's a lot of knee-jerk responses to doing evaluation, like we must do it, and it's a tick box, and you know, every funder has their own priorities, and so you sometimes feel like you're being pulled in 8 million directions as to what you should be counting and what you shouldn't. And I think my best advice to people is to think about what you need to know about your audiences in order to keep growing. You know, like in future, if you're thinking about the 5 years down the road version of yourself and you're missing something and you need to know how to get it, you know, how do you understand that from your audiences? And there are basics that every funder will want to know. And so get smart and prioritize actually understanding that stuff. It's for a lot of people who don't love evaluation, like the freaks that we are at DV, because I love it. And we do it constantly, like on a daily basis. We're always looking at analytics. We're always talking to our constituencies. If you don't love it in the way that we do, find a version of it that you can at least do, so that you begin to compile this sort of longitudinal record of your performance, which is really powerful when you take it to a funder and you say, we've cared about this long enough to show you at least 3 years of data. It's like, you know, in order to get a loan, you need 3 months of council tax bills or whatever it is, you know, like it's the same thing. It gives surety that what you're doing is consistent. And, you know, if you're smart and you interrogate the numbers in the right way, it will help you grow and be sustainable. So
that's such a good point. And there is definitely a tendency to think about evaluation as being just about the project that you're working on, and to get the end of the project and look back and then sort of almost draw a line under it. But what you're saying, if I've picked it up correctly, is that actually your value is designed from the start to help you with the next project and the one after that. Mm-hmm. And that's such a positive way of viewing it, that you can then, it's much more easy to see the value to the organization then, of doing the evaluation, as opposed to the value to the funder or the whoever else. So sure. I think that's a really good takeaway.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, what I would say is, you know, the NLHF has finally responded, let's say, with their new strategy as the major funder, you know, grant funder in the heritage sector in the UK. It's wonderful within their new funding priorities. What they've acknowledged is that, you know, these very time limited grant cycles are exhausting in terms of the community work that goes into it, because unless you're dropping your project into an existing community, it takes a ton of time to generate your audience, and then the money runs out and you have to put them back down again. So what I would say is about evaluation is the same thing as audience building. You know, if you've got a project that you're trying to raise interest for, you know, think about your audience though as people that are not just coming in for that project, but are coming into your organization as a whole. And like, how do you bring them in you might be bringing them in for a specific reason, but how do you maintain their interest so that they stay with you over time? And evaluation is really the only thing that's going to help you figure out what they want in order to make that happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. I spy a couple of questions that have appeared in the chat. So can we unmute Rebecca and let her ask her excellent question?
In the aftermath of winning the award, what sorts of new conversations are emerging for you with your European connections and colleagues?
Okay, it was a little bit muffled, but I've seen that she's posted it in the chat as well. So the question was, in the aftermath of winning the award, what sorts of new conversations are emerging for you with your European connections and colleagues? Great question, an absolute priority for us. Specifically, you know, we have heard from other projects, mass participation projects that we probably wouldn't have known about previously, who have found us either through the Europa Nostra Award or the Heritage in Motion profile. So it's fantastic to have colleagues working in the same space, although the legislative systems that Heritage operates in within European countries is very, very different than it is in the UK on continental Europe. So each country is almost a case study in itself. So it's been fascinating for us to learn how those legislative systems affect what is possible for people who want to work with public participants. There are things that are not possible for them that are possible for us, but then become more possible when you're operating digitally, for example. We've heard such a huge appetite, especially from Sneska and, you know, people who have been around Sneska, for, you know, this increased prominence of culture as and cultural heritage as the thing that's going to sort of bring us all back from the brink of this weird moment, you know, with the pandemic, where we lost so much of that cohesion in the world, you know, between us as individuals and people and communities. And, you know, she very much believes, and Europa Nostra very much believes, that cultural heritage is that great unifier that's going to help bring us all back from that. And so just being able to absorb that in every single thing that comes out from Europa Nostra as an organization, and the people alongside it who we've come into contact with, has been incredibly heartening for us. You know, there's no need to get into politics and everything, but let's just say that that's been harder to access for us in the UK than it has been with our continental European colleagues. So it's been fantastic to be a part of those conversations.
For everyone, Sneska is the Secretary General of Europa Nostra, and one of the great successes over the last few years has been the fact that cultural heritage and the value and the benefits that cultural heritage can bring are becoming increasingly embedded in more mainstream, broader European policies. And that's the impact of the work that Europa Nostra does, and it's supported by the evidence that we see in the impact that has been captured in things like the award winners. So that's the sort of connection between the two things for everyone else. I see there's another question which is from Kate, so perhaps we can hear from Kate.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really fascinating, Lisa. Really, really interesting. And you were talking about the impact that the award has had for you. So given that we'd all probably like to have an award like yours, have you got any tips for aspiring award applicants?
Yes. Do your evaluations, get your data together. I think the most important thing is to be able to stand over the change that you've made through the work that you've done. If you're dealing with tangible heritage, let's say a building or a conservation project, you know, obviously those results are much easier to demonstrate. But if it's a research project or something like ours, you know, you really do need to have your data together. So think about that at the beginning of your project, if you've not started already, or if you're sort of at a point where you can retrofit it, I would really encourage you to do that. And I think the bottom line is just go for it. You know, the experience of doing the form, the way the questions were asked was unlike any other application I've ever filled out. And it made me think about our project and interrogate the work that we had done in a different way. And that gave me sort of new language to understand it and to talk about it out in the world. So, you know, go ahead and just do the form. And at the end of it, if you decide to press send, then fantastic. And if you don't, then you've probably managed to learn something. And I would also say, get some good pictures. Because one of the things that's hardest to do is to illustrate what you're doing if you get to the end and you realize you didn't take any good pictures.
I think that's excellent advice. Speaking as someone who is on the jury, I think also there's something about being able to explain your project as a very simple story. because the people who read the award dossiers don't necessarily know much about your country, much about the particular type of heritage or your organisation. So if people can tell a good story and capture that enthusiasm and the passion, that's very, very important.
Yeah, and I mean, I would echo what you said before about the value of culture and, you know, cultural heritage, and how, you know, what Europa Nostra does to support that. And, you know, it's more important than ever. And continental Europe is really, really leaning into that, and they're putting money behind it, which is the thing that's so amazing to me. You know, like as the balance sort of drops with how the money is being spent in the UK, we're seeing those things and those initiatives really take off. And I think there's going to be this massive flowering of fantastic work happening. And, you know, through membership in Europa Nostra, I'm able to stay in touch with those conversations, which are so important to continuing to motivate me, like as a practitioner, let's say, moving forward. So
you may not have seen this yet, Lisa, but there's a very lovely tribute in the chat from Joan Sutherland, who says that she's been involved with DV for, I make that 11 years.
Yeah.
So
amazing. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe my question should be, where do we sign up to be in the fan club?
Yeah, well, thank you, Joan, for your kind words. For those who haven't seen the chat, she's just said that what she's experienced with DV has been life-changing and affirming. I'd love to hear that. Thanks very much. The fan club, yes. I think on my last slide, the website is just digventures.com. I was talking a little bit about deep time, having been inspired by archaeology at home, which it absolutely is a continuation of those ideas. Very exciting. We are in the middle of recruiting right now for our next missions, which we're doing in partnership with the Earth Trust. So if you are at all interested in being able to learn how to do this kind of work from the comfort of your own home with a nice cup of tea in hand, then please, you know, go to the website, go to the Deep Time page and sign up. Everyone is welcome. Training will be starting, I think, in about a month's time, and be barreling on from there. And we're super fascinated to see what we can help big landowners with in the future, helping to reach those net zero targets. So
I think that's a good point to end on, actually, is to reference the issues around climate change and the fact that cultural heritage, as we know, is sadly very much at risk. And so being able to build in adaptation, mitigation into projects and to help communities deal with that is something we see more and more in the awards applications. And that's a particular aspect of good practice that it's really vital that we share. So I shall be watching with interest to see how your new project pans out. And I should say that just because you've won an award once, of course, does not mean that you're not entirely eligible to submit yourselves for another award in the future.
Yes.
I'm sure we'd be delighted to see that in due course. I'm going to wrap us up now. So thank you, particularly to you, Lisa, for bringing that fantastic project to a wider audience, and for sharing very generously the things that you've learned and the top tips with us this evening. I'd also like to say thanks to everyone else who has been quietly working away behind the scenes, manning the technology and putting the event on. We have a small committee at Europa Nostra UK of volunteers, and we're desperately keen to share the awards projects with a wider audience. So as I said, this was the first in a series. We're just planning the rest of that series now. I think the next event will be featuring a thing called HOME, H-O-M-E-E, which stands for Heritage Opportunities and Threats Within Mega Events in Europe, which translates as a research project that is looking at how you make sure you get good things to happen for conservation and culture as part of the mega events that now happen in major historic cities in Europe. So that's a really interesting one, because obviously we have cities of culture and cities of literature and things like that in the UK. So I'm sure we'll learn lessons from that. So do please, everyone, keep an eye on our website, keep an eye on our Twitter feed. And we'll share the date and the information about that event very soon. And then there will be another 3 or 4 of these webinars through the year. And of course, if you haven't already seen it, there are 2 fantastic winners of the European Heritage Awards in this year's round. We have Cleveland Pools, which is over near Bath, and also a research project, Miniari, which is to do with illuminated manuscripts. So they will feature in a future series. I'm just dangling that in front of you all as an opportunity. And if Lisa has managed to enthuse you about the idea of the Europa Nostra Awards, the European Heritage Awards, I am happy to say that this year's call for entries is also open. And there are 5 categories. Education, training skills is one of them, but there's also heritage champions, there's research, there's a conservation and adaptive reuse category, and now I've lost a category. Citizen engagement, that's the other one. So there's plenty of different themes that you can think about. Please do submit your projects. If anyone listening would like a little bit of help and advice, I and other members of Europa Nostra UK are happy to offer some thoughts and some encouragement. So do please get in touch with us if you would value that. But otherwise, can I just say a final thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Please do take up Lisa's invitation. Please do read a little bit more about Europa Nostra and Europa Nostra UK. And if you'd like to get involved, we'd be very delighted to have you. So have a good rest of Friday, everyone. Have a lovely weekend and take care of yourselves. Thank you.